everyone. Whoops, we accidentally have our guest on too.
You caught me dancing.
Mercury retrograde, folks.
How do you
Mercury retrograde. How it goes.
How do you not dance during that intro? I would have been like,
I know, into the groove, yeah. So anyway, I am Christine Gritman. We are here with Let's Talk About Brands. I do this show every Friday at this time, which for me is 12 noon Eastern. Please tell us what time it is for you. Is it 9 a.m. Pacific? Is it 5 p.m. British time? Where are you joining us from? Also, where are you joining us from in terms of platform? We are live right now, hopefully, on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube. We do this every single week. Another thing I do every single week is on Tuesdays, I have my Twitter chat, #chataboutbrand. The Tuesday Twitter chat does not have a guest, but it is always on the same topic as the Friday guest live stream. This week we had a fantastic conversation on Tuesday in Chat About Brand, all about branding with story. We started out by talking about what story even means. It's one of those concepts that we all just kind of understand, but we defined that a little further, and we talked about how telling stories in our own marketing, in our own social media, in our own brand, in our own lives increases how much people can kind of latch onto it themselves and how deep the message goes. So the reason why we were talking about story this week is because we have a master storyteller on with us today. Many of you were very excited to see that this week's guest is Ann Handley. She is the author of several books, including Everybody Writes, which is getting a new edition, which we're going to be talking about. And a lot of us have seen her on stages. I've seen her in stages on 2 continents, and I got on one of those stages with her back in March. And so we're going to be talking about the elements of a good story, why story matters in brand, all that good stuff. But in the meantime, without any further ado, let's bring her on. Ann Handley, come on down.
So once upon a
down an aisle, right? Like high-fiving along the way.
I'm all over the place with my scenes today, but that's okay. They're not here for me. They're here for you. They're here to hear the good stuff. So welcome, Ann.
Thank you. Thank you. So nice to see you. So nice to be here with you and everyone in the audience today. So I'm truly honored just to join you for a few minutes here.
Yay! Thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to jump right in, and I did mention this to you in the little pre-show thing. I'm going to jump right in, and we talked about story and why branding with story matters and how story can help further your branding. But your brand is story. You have literally branded with story. You are the person who tells us all about story. And I know that you're a writer and a speaker, but I want to learn a little bit more from you about sort of how you became the story person, how you literally have branded with story.
Wow. Well, thank you, first of all. Yeah, I don't know. That's a big question. Let me think about this for a second. I mean, I think it's not unique to me, but I think that stories are how I make sense of the world. And I think that's true for basically all of us. Like when I think about it, Christine, like, story is literally the only thing that we remember, right? And from a branding standpoint, we could be, I could tell you all about like all of the features and benefits if I were a product, which I'm not, but if I were a product, I would be telling you about my features and benefits and like sort of, why I matter to you. But the thing that really wraps that together in an emotional connective way is a story. It's literally the only thing that I think truly connects with another person. And like, listen, we all know this, right? It's like we've all been like watching Netflix late at night, bleary-eyed, and it's like, I got to go to bed. But you're so hooked on the story that you're like, well, maybe just the first 10 minutes of this next episode, right? It's already buffering in. Maybe I'll just watch a little bit of it. And the next thing you know, it's like 2 a.m. and you're just like, oh God, I have a 9 a.m. meeting. So we all know how compelling stories are. And I think that, it's true of us, how we are entertained. It's true of how we view the world also. And that's really all that story is. It's really just telling the story of why you matter to the people who matter to your business. We get caught up on the like how to tell a story, the framework of a story, the structure of a story, but ultimately story is about emotion, and it's about connecting with the people who matter to you in a way that matters to them.
I love that. Now, you mentioned how stories are about emotion. And traditionally, now this has shifted over the years for sure, but traditionally, people didn't often talk about business and emotion in necessarily the same breath. Of course, marketers sort of always have. But can we talk a little bit about the position that emotion takes in business and especially in business communication?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm just thinking about that a little bit. Have we not talked about emotion in the past? I mean, I don't know if that's true because I think about like our favorite brands, like, like I think about Nike, for example. Like I wear Nike shoes. Why do I wear Nike shoes? Because they make me feel capable. I'm not athletic, but they make me feel capable. I also like the way they fit. So I do like the features, but I also like the way that I like the brand, right? And so I think the foundation of any good brand has always been story. I think what's changed though is that we are a lot more intentional about how we are telling those stories and how we are packaging them. And part of that is just because, like what you and I are doing right now, right? We have so many more opportunities to connect with our audiences. We have so many more platforms. We have so many more. We have content. We have social media. We have all these different modalities of communication. And so what that means is that we need to think about what's the story that we're telling across everything. What is our brand story, and then how are we telling it in these individual channels, the channels that matter most to our business. So that's how I think about it. And I think that increasingly, especially in the B2B world, we're seeing that story is so necessary. As a vehicle to connect with the people who matter to your business, your audience and your customers.
To that end, I love how you pointed out that the overall brand story is a consistent thing across all these platforms.
Right.
But I'd like to talk about those platforms for just a moment because, of course, there's the written word, there's the stage, there's social media, there's different social media platforms, there's your website. And of course, while your overall story needs to be consistent, what are some differences that we might want to take into account when telling our story in different places?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I don't think that your story changes necessary, but the tone that you take, I think, can change depending on the platform that you're using, and also the mindset of your audience. Like, for example, if I'm not on TikTok. I mean, I am there mostly as a 100% actually as a viewer. I don't create content there. But if I were going to create content on TikTok, I would think about, all right, so I'm all about writing and words and storytelling. What I would do on TikTok is probably translate that into how-to content because it's a perfect opportunity to teach something super fast. I would do something like that. So that's one way of telling that story and packaging it in a way that is what the audience will relate to, expect, and love. If I were doing the same thing on LinkedIn, though, I mean, I might do like a weekly LinkedIn live show, and so yes, I'd be talking about the same ideas, but I'd be doing it in a different way. Maybe I'd have you on as a guest so we could talk about brand and story. I think it ultimately just comes down to figuring out what your bigger story is, and then looking at the attributes of those platforms and what makes sense for that. You're not necessarily telling a different story. I think you're telling the same story. You're just pulling different elements out of it in a way that the audience will expect and appreciate.
If you are telling a brand story, so it's not just me, at a barbecue telling someone what happened with my kid yesterday, but if you are telling a story that is intended specifically to get something across about your brand, what are some key elements that you want to make sure to include in that story that's going to help it get across and not make people go, brand, no?
Yeah, I mean, I think we make this mistake a lot as marketers, right? We start our story by talking about ourselves. And what I advise companies that I talk to all the time, and I think you've heard me talk about this on stage too, but it's to start in the middle. Start in the middle of your story. And what I mean by that is, yes, you have a product, you have a solution, you have something that helps an audience, right? But think about that person that you help. So don't start with your brand, start in the middle. Start with who are you helping, number one. So who is your audience? And then secondly, why now? Why does it matter to them now? Answering those two questions, I think ultimately it's the essence of your story. It's the two central components of your story. So who do you care most about? Who do you help? Who do you lift up? Who is your audience, number one? And then number two, why now? Why do you matter right now? Those are the two elements that I think a lot of us miss. We tend to start with, I have this amazing product and here are ways it can help you, but forget about that. Start with the you, right? Start with the person you're seeking to attract, and then answer that question, why now? Why does this matter to you right now? And in some ways, even as I'm listening to myself say this, it sounds so elemental, right? It sounds so basic, but I see it all the time in social media and content and websites. I mean, all over the place. We start with, we have this thing and you will love it because, but forget about we have this thing. Go right into, you will love it because it helps you do what?
I love that. And that relates actually to one of my questions in the chat, which was, you always hear you don't want to tell your story so much as you want to tell almost their story,
Hmm.
but at the same time, I mean, there's a balance there. There's telling a story that they can see themselves in, their pain points, their struggles, all of that, to show that you understand them. But then there's the other side of that, of like, well, you don't want to speak for people, and you should, talk about what you know. So how do we find that balance there of sort of making sure the other person can see themselves in our story without kind of overstepping and making sure that we're being genuine to ourselves? Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
it's funny. I actually wrote in my newsletter on Sunday was all about this topic because I was in an event last week, the Creator Economy Expo (CEX) in Phoenix, Arizona. It was incredible, by the way. So if you are a creator, you should absolutely think about going to this event next year. It was really fantastic. It also had, by the way, just side note, it had like that great like first event energy. You know what I mean? Like everybody's so excited to be there and like so excited to connect with one another. It was so fantastic. Um, but anyway, back to the story. So I talked on stage about storytelling. How do you actually tell a story as a creator in a way that connects with the people who matter to you? So I talked about, figuring out who your customer is and then, why now, answering those two questions. And afterwards, somebody came up to me and she was like, excuse me, like I was talking to my business coach and he said that what I should really be doing is, talking about why I'm valuable. Like, what do I have that's different than what anybody else has? And she said, so I'm like confused. Like, I don't know what to do with that. Like, I loved your speech, but, and so I said, well, here's the deal. Like, those two things are not in conflict. Those two things actually support one another. So the trick, to go back to your original question, is to think about what you do or what you sell, but always frame it from the perspective of the customer. That's what it means by making the customer the hero of your story. Tell their stories, and obviously, like, you want to talk about your product, but always in the context of what it does for others. And so there's no magic to it, Christine. I think it's just a matter of really thinking about, why does my audience care? Why now? Why is this critical now? And so you're not so much talking about your own product as much as how it helps. And that's ultimately really what storytelling is.
I love the why now because before I was in social media, I was in journalism, and I'm kind of in journalism again now that I'm the editor for Social Media Pulse. And
Yeah.
that was a big, big thing that kind of came down from on high and messed with everyone's heads for a minute when it came down, which is like every story we told, since we were a local outlet, we had to answer the question, why now and why us? We couldn't do the
Mm.
generic, do the same story anyone could do anywhere but slot in some local experts. They were like, nope, why now? Why here? Why us? And it
Hmm.
was frustrating at the time, but it really made us better storytellers and made us think a lot more about the audience we were serving, which is ultimately
Yeah, yeah. I love that. I didn't know you started in journalism, by the way, as did
lots of
I.
social
Yeah.
people did.
I know, isn't it funny? Actually, yeah, we did a survey at Marketing Pros not too long ago, and we asked a lot of marketers, what field did you begin your career in? How many of you started in marketing? And literally, there was a very, very small percentage of people who actually started the career in marketing. And
Yeah.
interestingly enough, it was like, how many of you have ever taken a marketing class in college or in higher education? And literally, like, I think it was like 20% of the audience had ever taken a single marketing course.
Yeah, we didn't
And
even
that
have that at my
yeah,
school.
didn't include me. I was a journalism major too. But journalism is the number two field that marketers tend to come from. Number one is sales, weirdly, but
Wow.
Weird but true.
Well, we're telling stories. I think it makes perfect sense, and it speaks to the importance of story. That's what journalist does, and that's what a good marketer does.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
occurred to me that with that, I sort of skipped ahead. But let's see if Yella's question is a little bit different. Yella asked her in the chat, "What are the things?" Oh no, it is different. What are the things you do before you start writing a story? So how do you get in the zone?
How do you get in the zone for telling a story?
Doesn't even have to be like the mental zone. It could also be, prep, knowing your audience. But whatever you got, whatever you do, that's your method of sitting down. You're gonna write a story. So what do you do?
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, and I think it translates to any marketer as well. It's how I coach the team at Marketing Profs about doing this as well. Just think about that. Just think about one person. I think in marketing, this is true of when we're thinking about telling a story, but it's also just true of when we're creating any kind of content. We tend to sit down and we think about the audience. We think about them as this sort of faceless, nameless kind of mass of people, all the people who are going to be reading our content or getting our email or watching this YouTube video, anything like that. We think of this audience, but I don't find that's particularly helpful. I think it's more helpful to think about one person at one time. So that's how I do it. I think about one conversation that I had with somebody in an event hallway. Like I just mentioned, I wrote my whole newsletter to this woman, Jen, who asked me that one question after my talk last week. So find one person and answer their question. The irony in marketing, and Christine, you know this as a former journalist, but the more specific you can make your content, the more specific you can write to one person, ultimately the more universal it'll feel, because you're being very connective, right, as you write. So that's the way that I do almost everything. That's true whether I'm writing a blog post or whether I'm writing a second edition of a book. Right? Like right now, I'm literally in the middle of the second edition of Everybody Writes, and I'm thinking about one person as I write this. It's different than the first time I wrote it, but it's one person who I think this book will truly help.
That concept of one person is so killer. I need to start adapting that. I'm always a little bit worried about making sure that it appeals to a broad swath, but if you're talking to everybody, you're talking to nobody. And you
Yep.
know, I
Yep.
know that
100%.
in some ways, but it's hard to like do it.
Yeah, and I think, in marketing, we talk about this all the time. We talk about having, market segments or we develop personas.
Yeah.
And like, no disrespect, but I don't find that particularly appealing for my own content creation efforts because while that may be useful in terms of really honing in on, maybe who you serve, I think when you sit down to create content, to tell a story or to write an email, any of it, you've got to think about that one person at the other end of the screen. You've got to think about one person who you want to affect the behavior of. And so that's what inspires me. I think about one person, and it does a couple of things for me as a writer and as a storyteller. It kind of like loosens up my voice a little bit. So I'm not like, dear valued customers, it's like you totally lose that, number
Yeah.
one. So I don't sound like I'm, reporting a 5-car pileup on the freeway. Instead, I'm like talking to one person at one time. Like I sort of get out of that mode. And the second thing is that I think it makes my advice a whole lot more useful because I'm really understanding like what are the challenges that this person has. And that person, by the way, is a proxy for a broader audience. When I described a second ago how like I wrote my email newsletter to Jen, I mean, I didn't literally say, "Dear Jen, here's the answer to your question." I mean, I kind of mentioned her in there only because it was relevant to the setup of the story. But I wrote it in a way that it would be universal for anybody who has that question, and so I think that's the key. Like make it specific, and the more specific you make it, ultimately the more universal it'll be.
Yep. Definitely writing that one down for sure.
Ah,
Question on Tuesday. So now marketing group. They said, heck yes, we have questions. We're big fans of marketing profs and Ann Handley. So now marketing group's question is, what is your advice for brands looking to create more of a conversation with their audience as a result of their content? So how do you drive engagement with your content?
I just had to mute myself so you didn't hear that, like that gross swallow. Do you ever like on a Zoom or something or on a video like this and
There's
somebody
like a
swallows? It's just like,
gurgle.
ugh, I hate that. Um, Sorry, more of a conversation. The
Yes.
question was.
Conversation, engagement. How do you use your content to drive engagement and conversation?
Oh, perfect. I got so distracted by my own thirst that I blacked out for a second there. Um, so how do you drive conversation? I mean, I'll tell you the way that I that I do it. I think there's no one way to drive conversation, but the way that I do it is to always invite people to comment back, to write back to me, and I do that by embedding questions, whether intentionally or whether overtly, I mean, or less overtly, in almost everything that I do. Um, and I'll just give you like a super quick example of that. But so I launched my own email newsletter 3 years ago in January of 2018. Is that 3 years? 4 years? Three? Four?
What is
Um,
time anymore?
it is four. What's time anymore? I don't know. In a post-pandemic world, who knows? It was 4 years ago. And one of my goals for that was to nurture my relationships with an audience. The thing about email though is that it's one way, right? How am I going to get people to traditionally it's one way. How am I going to get people to respond to me? And so right off the bat, like when you sign up for my email newsletter, I ask you a question. What did you hope to learn here? How did you find me? It's two softballs, by the way, because I think one of the mistakes that we make as marketers is expecting too much from our audience. Like, everyone is busy. Everyone has a million things going on all the time. We're pulled in a lot of different directions. And so if you want to engage community, number one, like give them a softball to start out with, like when you open that conversation. And so about 65% of my of my email list opens that initial welcome email. And then about 30% of the audience actually responds to that email. I'm working on getting that up because I'm wondering, is that question too hard? Um, so it's a matter of testing what works with your audience, of course, but also just like starting out with some softballs and then building that relationship over time. So what happens now is when I send an email newsletter, I usually get about 100 responses back. My list is close to 50,000 people. So if I get fewer than 100 people writing back to me with any particular email newsletter, I wonder why that is. What did I do here that didn't invite some kind of response? And so, again, I think we tend to overthink this as marketers. We tend to think about, how do I engage a community? Well, the way to engage a community, honestly, is one person at one time. That's what it takes. And so worry less about being scalable, at least when you're building community, and worry more about, how do I connect with one person at one time? Because ultimately the unscalable becomes scalable. Now I have those people who are part of my community who now are referencing it elsewhere, who are inviting other people to participate. That's what's driving the growth of this newsletter, but it starts with one relationship.
That's awesome. That's probably going to play into the answer to this next question that we got from the chat.
I like this.
Jeff,
It's a twofer.
yeah, Jeff Funk, great name, Jeff Funk, wants to know some of the so you're the chief content officer for marketing profs. And so
Yes.
he wants to know some of the key ingredients in the sustainability over the years of
This
marketing
is
profs. And also, if you
sustainability.
could tell those who don't know what exactly marketing profs is, this would also be a good time to get that in there.
Yeah, sure. So Marketing Profs is an education and training company. We help B2B marketers learn how to use digital tools and platforms more effectively through our training programs. They just full stop. That's what we do. Um, and so there are different ways that we deliver that training, but everything that we do is essentially content, right? So as the chief content officer, my job is basically I head up all content there, which means that anything that we publish or produce is under me. Fun fact, by the way, I am the world's first chief content officer. I made that title up way before content was a thing. So it was so my first company was ClickZ. That was started that in 1997, which makes me sound like a relic because I'm extremely old. But I gave myself that title there. And the reason why I gave myself that title is because, half the business, so ClickZ is and was, when we founded it, a marketing newsletter. And we founded it to help businesses learn how to use this brand new thing called the internet. Like, ooh, like that was a thing back then. And so I thought, if we're going to be delivering this learning to our audience at the time in 1997, it's going to be through our newsletters and through our website content. And so I wanted to elevate content to be so critical to the business, because we were literally a content company. So I gave myself this idea of this title of chief content officer, and I've just carried it forward since. Oh, anyway, sustainability. I didn't answer that question.
Oh,
Um, Sustainability. I mean, I think, we obsess about our audience. I think is like the only thing that I can think of. I mean, yeah, we've been around for a really long time, since 2000. I joined as a partner in 2002. So I am not the founder, although a lot of people think that I am.
yeah.
But I've sort of become the face of the company, so you can see why that's an easy assumption. But I think, we obsess about our audience. We evolve the business as the market evolves. We don't look the same in 2022 like we did in 2002 when I joined. In 2002, we were a straight up publisher. We published newsletters. We started our first webinar program in 2007, which seems like, well, yeah, everybody is offering webinars now, but in 2007,
Yeah,
like,
no, they're
nobody was doing webinars. It was really complicated. So, we have continually tried to push the boundaries and evolve the business. And so we started as a publisher, started adding on content assets, and then we realized, we're not a publisher. What we actually do is training and education. And so we evolved the program to serve the audience better as a training and education company. So I think that's the key. It's a key to sustainability of any business, right? You just can't stay the same. You've got to constantly be thinking about, how do we iterate, how do we evolve based on what our audience needs from us, and also based on, kind of what's going on in the world, right? I mean, when you think about it, we were a content company in 2002. I then spent, a decade teaching companies how to be their own content companies, and what does that mean for a content company, right? And so it's a little bit of a reaction to the reality of modern marketing.
absolutely. And we got Jeremy Linneberg in the comments here making us both feel like relics, as you said. He said 1997 is the best year, though, Anne. That's when I was born.
I know. Tell me about it, my friend. You're the same age as my daughter. So,
Goodness.
yeah, who, by the way, is now working as a content marketer. So, you
Please.
know, life comes full circle. It's the year she was born, and yeah, I actually measure my career based on her. So,
Yeah.
because I look at how much she's grown, and I think, yeah, that checks out.
Yeah, I made several career changes that I can specifically track back to. Okay, this is when Josh was a baby. This is when Ellie was a baby. Yeah, so I'm doing the same thing.
Yeah, yeah, I know, it's funny, but that's true of your career as well. Like, you're not doing the same thing that you were in
No,
1997, just like I'm not.
because it
So
didn't
I think,
exist.
yeah. And honestly, that's the thing I love about marketing, because it doesn't stay the same. Like, that's why I would never survive in a field like, I don't know, accounting. Like, it's basically been the same since forever, right? I mean, the concepts are the same. The tools may change a little bit, but marketing is not the same. And I think that's what keeps me engaged. And the key to, staying engaged is to just stay curious. Like, I love to learn about new platforms like TikTok, for example, right? We talked about it a second ago. I'm not creating content on there yet, because I really want to understand, like, well, how can I use this? How might I use this? So eventually I will. But, to me, it's like, I love it when I see something new, because it doesn't feel exhausting to me. It doesn't feel like, another channel. It feels like, oh my God, like, what an incredible opportunity. Like, it just blows me away, the creativity on there, and the way that, that people are building and engaging audiences on there. So what can we learn from that? Like, that's what I love about marketing so much.
And the new ways to tell stories. Okay.
Yeah.
The final question we got for
Yeah.
you on our chat on Tuesday. Dave Bednar wants to know, how was it sharing the stage with Christine Gritman?
Oh
Yeah.
my God. She was a rock star. Like, 100%. So
Yeah.
great.
We have a clip of that that I'm gonna roll, but to explain context for that for those who don't know, you know what? I'll let you tell the story.
Yeah. So, I share a storytelling framework on stage, or I did at that talk anyway. I shared a storytelling framework for how I think through stories, and it's based on Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, right? It's based on that animated cartoon that many of us might know, and or maybe you don't know the cartoon, but at least you know the song. Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, that song. So it's based on that story. And I needed a volunteer from the audience, and so I connected with Christine ahead of time, and I was like, "You need to like come on stage with me," and you did a fantastic job. So,
Thank you.
yeah, it was a lot of fun. So basically, what we did is we took Christine shared her business, and we took her business through that storytelling framework to really get at her story. So yeah, so that's what we did.
And it was great. So thank you so much for that. All right, so we are going to let you go in just a moment, but first, tell everyone where they can and should find you, and also about the very special thing you're working on right now.
Oh yeah. So I'll take the second part first. The very special thing I'm working on is a second edition of this book over here. Everybody Writes. It is a. I thought it was going to be like an easy task. Like I thought I was just going to maybe like vacuum, like puff up the pillows a little bit, like make it nice, update it. Yeah, it's turned into like a total slog, a total rewrite. Partly because I am such a perfectionist, and partly because things have changed. Right, things have changed even in writing since that book came out in 2014. So, which really wasn't that long ago, but yeah, so things have changed, and so there's a lot of updating that I realized I needed to do on it. So that's what I've been working on. I am pretty tired right now, to tell you the truth. It's like I'm in the final throes of it. I have about another 100 pages to go in terms of the rewriting, but I'm excited about it, and I can't wait for the writing to be over so then I can start moving on to the next phase of it. I'm kind of just so like so mired in it right now. So yeah, so that's what I'm working on. It'll be out in October of 2022, which is this fall, right around the corner, which is why I'm under the gun right now. Um, so that's the second part of your question. The first part of my question is, you can find me anywhere. If you're not on my email newsletter list, I would love to welcome you to that. It's at annhandley.com/newsletter. Or you can find me on any of the social channels at Ann Handley, pretty much. I think I own, yeah, pretty much everywhere on the social channels. I'm also at Marketing Props on Twitter, but I also have Ann Handley on Twitter. So yeah, so that's it.
Fantastic, and I definitely recommend that everyone does go find Ann Handley on all the things because you're just such a generous source of information always. And the fact is, the best way to teach somebody how to write, or the best way for someone to learn how to tell a story, is to see it done so well. And
Yes.
that's one of many reasons why people should go follow you.
Oh, thank you. Well, thank you so much for having me here today. It was such a nice break to spend a half an hour with you. So thank you for that.
Thank you so much for being here live from the tiny office
I'm
or
the
whatever.
tiny office. Yes, I'm in the tiny office with my tiny dog, who is, come here. You want to say hi?
Big dog!
It's like 80 degrees here and he's like wiped out. Come on. No, I'm getting a tail wag, but sorry,
Oh.
he's not feeling it right now. So,
Well, we got you. That's the important part. Thank you so much for
all
being
right,
here.
thanks for having me.
And everybody make sure to check out Ann Handley. Another thing to make sure to check out is, as I mentioned before, I do this show every week, but I also do a chat every week. So that chat is Chat About Brand. That's Tuesdays on Twitter at noon. And we're going to be talking next Tuesday about branding your cause. Because, some people, sometimes nonprofits and, social movements and things, it can feel like, oh, it doesn't feel grassroots enough. It feels too corporate. No, this is how you get attention. This is how you get buy-in by really, kind of having something solid around your cause. And we're going to be talking on Friday to two people who actually do that, who help people with that. We're going to be talking to Joe Cole and Dakota Snow about how they help causes and how they help social good organizations get that branding down so that they can get more recognition, more reach, and more people for their cause. Thank you so much for being here for Let's Talk About Brand. I'm going to send you out, before we do our outro, I'm going to send you out with a clip of that onstage moment with Ann Handley that we mentioned, where she very kindly went through the Rudolph framework. Oops. There we go.
So once upon a time, there was personal brand coaching, and it's the capacity to help Christine's clients, in this case, be found. Some people doubt it because personal branding can feel like a little braggy sometimes, right? That's kind of its reputation. But one day, what happens? Other people are besting them. They're not showing up when someone is searching on social for them. They're not showing up on Google, like none of it, right? So why do people suddenly need this? Because people need to find them, right? People need to find that person. Underlined. To help what? To help the people they help, which are small business owners, because small businesses need a chance against the big box companies. And what does that do? It brings together their entire community. And in the end, you know who gets a kiss?
Aww.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.